It's time for a beer, rum, and rock and roll rock shot. This time, Brett Miles and I are reviewing Nothing But a Good Time, the uncensored story of 80s hair metal. This 3-part docuseries, directed by Jeff Tremaine, is a fresh and candid behind-the-scenes look at one of music's most iconic eras. Each episode showcases the insanity and blazing ambition that has enthralled generations of music lovers and continues to influence culture to this day. But before we give our thoughts, let's take a look at the trailer.
In the 80s, it was an exciting time in music. It was amazing.
You had to have lived it.
Go all the way. More hair, more clothes, tighter pants. That is what rock and roll is about.
This heavy metal music, is all of it bad?
To me, they're all satanic. I don't want anything to do with it.
On tour, every human depravity came out.
He's throwing meat and blood at the audience.
I wanted to play so hard that my hands would bleed. I would have blood on my snare all the time.
He modified the con piece and put explosives in it. We just heard a big boom. The thing backfired into his balls.
They made it seem so awesome to just have sex and do drugs.
It was nothing but a good time, not the life I live.
I feel like I'm gonna die, so I probably shouldn't be in this band.
When you have that level of dominance, there's nowhere else really to go except for off the cliff.
Randy winds up taking a joyride.
I'm awakened by boom! That I was gonna take care of him. I brought him back home in a box.
I had to change my life, get back on track.
The music withstood the test of time.
They really changed the game.
We bet on ourselves, and when it paid off, it was awesome.
You didn't realize what a magical time you were in.
Okay, Brett Miles, welcome back to the show, buddy. Our last doc we reviewed is Bon Jovi, so what a natural segue, right?
I guess so. Is this the I Love Hair Metal guy that you brought on the show here? This is not my normal cup of tea. This is not the revolving music that lives in my Spotify. So that said, this was fun.
Hey, man.
This was fun.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, my friend.
What are you drinking today?
I've got a little Retro Spectrum from Cabin. I do like the craft beer, and so yeah, local brew.
Awesome. You're the beer part of the show. I got a little rum and coke rocking here.
Very nice.
All right, man, let's talk about this decade and a genre of music I certainly dug, and I know you dig some of it, I'm sure. The 80s hard rock / glam / hair metal scene, whatever you want to call it, through this documentary. It's directed by this cat named Jeff Tremaine, who did Jackass stuff, and he did the Motley Crue biopic, The Dirt. And his quote is, "This docuseries is a celebration of the most outrageous decade in rock and roll. It's my love letter to the 80s. That was his little quote I saw. So it's based on this bad boy right here.
I've not yet read that one.
I just finished it.
I may need to borrow it because I'm very curious to see how the two compare.
So it's almost got the same title, Brett. Nothing But a Good Time, the uncensored history of 80s hard rock explosion, this is called. So it's these two cats, Tom Boger and Richard Beanstalk or Beinstock. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It has, of course, way more stories in it than you're going to fit in this doc, or any doc for that matter, right? So there's that. That's my one comment on it.
Even in a 3-part doc, you can only put so much in. And I appreciate that they tried to span that entire genre in what limited time they had. And for the most part, they did a good job, I thought.
Yeah. I'd like to point out, though, right off the top, Miles, that nobody used the term hair metal at that time. There was no such thing as a hair metal band. I don't know if everybody knows that, but it was a term coined in the 90s as a put down to this type of music. These bands were either glam or metal or hard rock or whatever. They weren't hair metal.
It wasn't until later into the 90s when you saw the oversaturation of it that it really became, quote, hair metal. But even the big guys in the 80s, the Poisons and you name it, the big hair, the makeup, they they weren't hair metal at that time. And it was only until after.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but if you were a hard rock metalhead like I was in the 80s, it was an amazing time to be into that music. Because you've got the AC/DCs, the Priests, the Maidens, all these bands, on top of the Sunset Strip hair metal stuff, on top of thrash coming in '86, you know, with Master of Puppets and stuff. Like, that decade kicked ass if you were a rock fan.
It really was incredible. Like you said, you had all these great bands who were already established or establishing themselves as one of the greats. At that point, it wasn't oversaturized, but you had everybody and anybody going, I want to be a part of this. And I think you had your 1, 2, 3 great bands. All of a sudden, you've got 10, 20, 30 other clones. And it was exciting at the time. You had all this music. We have it so good now when it comes to accessibility of music. You just type in the artist on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever, and away you go. Back then, you had to discover music either through MTV, Much Music, on the radio, or you would be going to your HMVs, your A&As, your A&B Sounds, and you would be buying the cassettes. I was the cassette guy. This was before CD. So it really was an incredible time for music.
Absolutely, man. There's no doubt about it. I mean, every decade has their shitty stuff, quote unquote, but there was a lot to like in the 80s, man, if you're a rockhead. Okay, let's dive into this thing, man. I'd like to talk about the artwork they've used for this thing right off the top. You got Blackie Lawless shooting sparks out of his codpiece, out of his crotch. I mean, that sums up the whole thing for me. That picture is perfect for this.
It's perfect. I'm going to go out on the limb right now and say it's borderline misrepresentative of what we are about to get in this doc. And that's one of the big issues I've got with it is you've got this awesome imagery as your cover art, this poster, phenomenal. You've got the king of debauchery, Blackie Lawless, staring at you, codpiece galore. And you tuck right into the name of the doc, Uncensored. I have a real issue with that, and that's going to be the major theme in my talk in this day.
Oh, God, here we go. All right, man, let's just start going back and forth. I'll just, off the top, the production value is good.
Yes.
Like, there's clearly some money behind it. That checks a box that has to be checked for me.
Totally agree. I liked the way that they shot the interviews. I liked the use of archive was tremendous. There were aspects of that. I thought that was the strong point, really. I saw some stuff I'd never seen before. So tremendous. And I thought that, some of the animations, when they got into some of the stories, it was good. It worked for me. It might not be the best I've seen, but I really enjoyed that. It really allowed me to get into those stories that the artists were talking about.
Totally. I thought it was fun. It definitely added. It didn't take away, man. I'm big on timeline, and they got that okay. Everything flowed more or less chronologically, and I dig that. I don't want it all over the fucking place. Just give it to me in some order.
I'm with you on that, too. I'm a sucker for a good chronological story, and I like the way they split it up into the 3 acts. You started definitely with sort of the birth. The middle act was just the height of it. It was incredible. And then your downfall or sort of that ending story. It made sense and it worked.
Totally. Okay, now we're going to get a little more nitpicky. Not enough Van Halen off the top. I mean, these guys influenced the whole fucking scene in a massive way. You got David Lee Roth. Every band wanted that guy as their frontman or somebody like him. Eddie's influence on every fucking guitar player in the world, let alone the Strip. And it goes from Van Halen, boom, you're the Quiet Riot and Randy Rhoads. Like, they could have lingered there a little bit longer, don't you think?
I had a real issue with the Quiet Riot, Randy Rhoads part. And then they went back to Randy after for an even shorter period of time. I really think they gave those bands, and especially Randy Rhoads, some real disservice. I think they checked some boxes conveniently, and then they moved on. And it's really unfortunate because I think those bands, those artists, they played such a huge role in the entire decade that followed. And it's a mere mention. And I think one of the glaring omissions is where are these guys? Where are these guys as talking heads?
Yeah.
I really had an issue with the fact that I'm listening to the A&R guys and the music producers and all these guys that are the supplemental storytellers telling the story. It really bothered me. We needed the main players, and it lacked.
Absolutely, man. We're going to be banging the same drum here, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You kind of alluded to this, that the archival footage was good. I mean, they worked with what they had, but let's face it, there's no cell phones or portable video back then. So there is very little quality live footage of these bands. You got their videos, but there's very little live footage of these bands. And that's too bad. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Let me ask you this. MTV is involved in this. We saw the logo off the top of the documentary series.
Yeah.
So do you think that these guys, Richard Beanstalk and Tom Beaujeu, do you feel like they exhausted as much as they could? I don't think they did. I think there were some major, major misses, and either they couldn't get what they wanted, which is my guess, it cost too much, whatever. I'm very curious as to why.
Right. You're hitting on something. Exactly. I was wondering also that exact thing. And sure, they showed some music videos, but man, there's a ton of them. And the music, there wasn't a lot of music in this either. Like, no. Maybe it's money, it's rights, it could be a lot of things. But man, it really suffered for a lack of that, right? I just wish there was more in it.
Absolutely.
Right.
You look at the Wasp segment in part 1, I thought it was fantastic. A lot of good footage, a lot of accurate footage.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you had Steve Riley, and that was okay. But again, I would have loved to hear some Blackie Lawless clips. I would have loved that. It wasn't there.
I know.
But the footage was there. I felt like there was enough backing content that it worked. You get to Motley Crue and talk about glaring. Didn't use a slice of their music.
This is what I'm saying. Like, it's like, what?
My gosh. It was painful to hear, you know, Vince Neil screaming at the US Festival to the crowd, and then canned music kicks in. I was cursing at the television. I thought it was almost at that point, I'm like, why are you making this doc? Stick to the book.
Well, here's my rant. Are you ready? Because you mentioned the interviews, and there's a lot of good ones. There's archival ones of Ozzy and whoever. But man, like you said it, where's Motley Crue? Where's Bon Jovi is arguably the first hair metal band ever.
Yep.
And Motley were the kings in terms of the Sunset Strip. They're not in it. Dude, here's the thing. If this was about just the Sunset Strip, that's one thing. But it's clearly not, because Skid Row's in it. They're from New Jersey. So clearly it's about the whole scene in its entirety. So where's Jovi, right? Where's Twisted Sister?
Yep.
Where's Sebastian Bach? Where's George Lynch? Where's Whitesnake? Tom Kiefer, Cinderella, Faster Pussycat. You mentioned Steve Riley from Wasp, but no Blackie. GNR, you get Steven Adler, nobody else. Who knows? Maybe a lot of these guys don't want to be considered hair metal. Maybe if this thing didn't have hair metal in the title, I thought, maybe they would have felt differently. I don't know, but man, there was some glaring interview omissions. It was unbelievable. And who do we hear from? The singer of Tough. I don't even know who that is. He's some Bret Michaels clone. I'm like, he seems nice enough, and who gives a shit? Can we hear from Vince Neil or somebody? Like, oh.
And I'll get to, defending the lead singer to Tough. I can't believe I just said that out loud. But I will. I think he was an appropriate person to put into the third part.
Sure.
It worked. He worked there.
Sure.
But you said it. Like, when you've got the A&R guy, who have you got? You've got Tom Zutaut.
Yeah.
The A&R rep. You've got, the booking agents. You've got the managers. You've got Slash's best friend from elementary school telling this awesome story about this band. Fucking boring. Give me a break. I was so pissed off.
I know.
That you're telling this uncensored story of one of the greatest rock bands, period, and a real important part of hair metal at that time, no question. You've got these guys telling this story. What a ripoff. It was frustrating to watch, and that makes me go back to the book. It's like, who's telling these stories in the book? Who's telling these stories where it's like, this is an awesome book. This is so great. The stories are so good. They don't resonate on screen when you've got second bit players telling the stories.
I agree. They're all in the book, by the way. Everybody I said is missing, they're all in there. So I want to think they tried and got shut down. Like, you got to think they did. Christ, as if they don't want Tommy Lee in this thing. Of course they do. It's just really too bad. I'm going to try to be more positive, Brett. Tracy Guns was great, I thought.
Love Tracy Guns.
Right?
Couldn't agree more.
He's cool, and I love his band. Steve-O was fun. Of course, he's a Jackass guy, so that made sense. And he had great stories. Corey Taylor was fucking fantastic. I could listen to this guy talk about his passion for this music all day long. He's great.
I loved that he was so just straight up truthful about it as well.
Yeah. Unapologetic as hell, yeah.
Unapologetic. He's like, poison? Yeah, poison.
If you don't like Talk Dirty to Me, fuck off, he says.
It was so... It made me go, okay, I don't feel so bad that I got the concert ticket in my closet still. So you're right. He had an energy and an enthusiasm that reminded me of how I felt when I was in the 80s, listening to this music, experiencing it for the first time. Absolutely. You talk about some great interviews. There were. I did like Don Dokken.
I'd rather have George Lynch, but
I'd rather have George Lynch all day long. Absolutely. I feel like George Lynch would have been a little bit more blunt, a little bit more straight up. Even with all of Don's debauchery stories and whatnot, he was still reserved. I loved the fact that they had some good rat representation. I thought Stephen Pearcy was solid. Warren DeMartini, I really wanted more from him because I felt like he was really reserved in his comments to the point where he didn't even want to share. Like, he didn't want to go down those roads.
Right.
And I thought, this is uncensored. We need you to go down these roads. There was a music producer, one of Motley's music producers, talking about, you know, they had the hot tub in the recording studio. Do you have any stories? No. What? You don't have any stories? You don't want to tell any stories? This is exactly what this documentary was supposed to be. And I felt like it was way too cautious in that sense.
Well, they're probably afraid to, right? That's why, to our point, you need it firsthand. You need it 100%. From Motley Crue. They're not worried about anything. Doc McGee is always good. I mean, this guy managed Motley, Skid Row, Bon Jovi, Kiss. He's got stories out the ass. I mean, it could have been just the Doc McGee story. Like, Christ.
It could have. And I love the fact that he was in there. I didn't need to hear from him as much. There were artists that were in for a blip, frustratingly little. I think about a guy like Reb Beach. Like, he looked pissed off when he was asked the line of questioning that he was asked. In the producers' minds, that's all that band was worthy of sharing, I guess, in this story. Really?
And I thought, you know, that guy, Alan Nevin, he was interesting, man. That GNR manager and Great White.
Yeah.
He's got great stories, and they weren't all positive, man. He wasn't sugarcoating shit. He's like, some of this was ugly, man. And I thought at least he gave that perspective where it wasn't all a good time. There was some ugly stuff that went on. So I didn't mind that.
Yeah, I didn't mind Alan Nevin. There were a couple of times where I thought, this guy loves having a camera turned on. He loves that he has the knowledge, that he has that experience. And that came across in the way he talked.
He had a healthy ego. Like, nobody died on my watch, this kind of stuff. Nope. You're like, okay.
Yeah. Well, I loved the preamble, the teaser for part 3, where he talks about, whoa. We need to talk about the debauchery and the deaths and the this and the that. And, well, where was it?
Yeah,
there
right.
was none. We go back to him later on and he's like, nobody died on my watch. What the fuck?
That's it.
You're teasing me with the stories, but you're not telling me the stories. So
my next little bit is Ricky Rackman and that whole cat house scene. Again, where's Tammy Down from Faster Pussycat? He was co-owner. You telling me he doesn't have shit to say? Where is he? A little sidebar. I did get to the cat house, but it was, you know, like 91 when the scene was kind of winding down. And I saw Fred Curry, drummer for Cinderella, there. And it was cool. But I wasn't there when it was really, really slamming. But I do have the notch, just as a sidebar. And Tammy Down, I mean, he's debauched as they get, man. So he would have been awesome to have in this thing for sure.
Them going down the road with the US Festival.
Yeah.
It really revealed sort of the shortcomings of the doc. I was excited when they threw that word out there. Rudy Sarzo, love the guy. He's been in way too many docs, though. he could have taken a pass on this one and get somebody else in.
Yeah.
I appreciated what he said, but taking us into this US festival was awesome. I was excited for it. What a letdown. Like, we're not hearing any of the music from the US festival. We're seeing very limited visuals. What am I missing here? This was a key moment in this history. What happened?
Yeah, it was massive, dude. Okay, man, let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about the fucking balls it takes to pack up whatever little shit you have and head to fucking LA to the Strip, hoping you might live your dream as a rock star. Are you kidding me? Like, the fucking odds of that happening are so slim. You got to admire that type of delusional drive. You really do.
That's a great way of putting it. That's a good viewpoint. Like,
as much as I hated at least half of these bands, like, I didn't love all of them. I hated like half of them at least. You got to give it up for the work ethic of a guy like Bret Michaels from Poison. I mean, these guys wanted this shit so bad. I mean, they're sleeping in cars, living at strippers' houses because they buy them groceries. Like, they got nothing, and they want it bad. You got to want it that bad to reach that kind of height. That's what I think.
It's true. And I think the equation was there for it to happen. You're in the right place. You're getting the right guys with the right pull in the industry, paying attention to what's going on. So, if you want success, you've got to go there. You've got to be in these bars on the Strip at that time if you're going to have any chance. And not everybody has that in them. I think later on, after the Poisons and after that first wave, then all of a sudden it became so much easier. Now all of a sudden you're Bang Tangos and your Bullet Boys and your this and that.
Hey, I like those bands.
Name it. I like those bands too. I had their music. I did. But it was so much easier because you already had the template built. You had your fun, hard rockin', power ballad equation that everybody just followed suit with. I assume you love the power ballad segment?
You know what? I don't mind a power ballad if you want to call it that. It just depends which one it is, I guess. Like, I'm a big Cinderella guy, so I like their power ballad.
Talk about another band that didn't get any mention. I think I saw Tom Kiefer once in the B-roll. Where are these guys?
Man, to me, they deserve the segment.
Yes.
I think they were huge, and they're buddies with Bon Jovi. Well, Bon Jovi didn't get a segment. I mean, that is insanity to me.
Yep.
How did they not get a segment? And let's talk about, these guys are up at 3 a.m. or whatever, 4 a.m., tearing down another band's flyers and the flyer wars. I mean, I knew all about that, but it is pretty hilarious. Like David Lee Roth going, hey, man, you got to put those higher up so they can't reach them and shit. I mean, that's funny.
It's such a point of the era. We will never know that kind of a world again, probably. It was such a unique and special time. I can only imagine seeing guys like Bret Michaels running around with the staple gun in one hand and a page full of 8x10s in the other. It's such a bizarre visual. So
it is hilarious. And talk about missed opportunity. The interviewer should ask Bret if his bandana is attached to his hair. That's really all I want to know from him.
See, now that would have been part of that's the Uncensored right there.
There you go. Let's go, man. Just kind of on that note that it's really hard. In 1979, too, just to backtrack, it's new wave, it's skinny ties and short hair. None of this was going on. So that's another thing that's admirable. Like, if you wanted to just make money, you're not doing what Motley Crue's doing. Like, they were completely against what was going on. And what I love about that is it's pure then. It's what they like and what they want to present, whether it works or not. And I love that.
You're so right. And that's why those bands, the Motleys and the GNRs and the ones that sort of break the mold at that moment are really special. One band that I loved seeing in this doc was Hanoi Rocks.
Yes.
The fact that they got Michael Monroe to sit down, do an interview, and it wasn't 1, 2, and away we go. That really was one of the big highlights for me of this doc. A definite pivotal moment for him, for the band. The story of Vince Neil and the car crash and the aftermath of that. That's the first time that story really hit at a different level than any other time. And so I really appreciated that we got some Michael Monroe, that we got some subsequent talk from guys like Tracy Guns who shared his love. There were so many bands that talked about how awesome Hanoi Rocks was. And that really was a shining spot in the doc for me.
No doubt. I mean, that was a great get, man. Absolutely. I mean, everybody stole their look and everything. Fuck. It's just too bad it was just snuffed out just like overnight, hey?
Incredible.
Yeah. Something else I want to touch on, Miles, is, dude, I will fully admit, I glorify that whole rock star lifestyle thing. I love Motley Crue, The Dirt, that book. I love it. I mean, it's a dream come true. You're in your 20s and it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll to the max. I do admit, I think it's awesome, blah, blah, blah. But again, they do hammer home this behavior was really obnoxious in a lot of ways as well, right? Like if you weren't partying on the level some of these guys are, it would have been absolutely painful. Like I won't recant any of these stories because I want people to watch this thing. You know, I won't blow that, but you know what I mean. There's some stories in there where you're like, Jesus, man, that'd be a lot to deal with.
Agreed. You see it in them as they're talking now. You see it in the guys that aren't able to sit down and talk about it because they've passed away. That's the level, the volatility of this roller coaster ride that they were on in the 80s and into the 90s. It wasn't just the environment of the bands that they were in. It was the entire ecosystem. You had the media, you had music television, you had the fans. All of a sudden you had these reactions from people, be it positive, negative, and it just creates higher highs and lower lows. And for a lot of these guys, I'm sure most of us, we don't have the capacity to handle that. We just don't. And I can't imagine being just a musician who's trying to break through. It's literally an all or nothing. And for some of them, they paid the price for it later in their lives.
Like some of these stories are absolutely insane. It's hard to believe that this shit actually happened. Okay, I got to talk about just one. Like that animated segment of Motley biting Eddie Van Halen. Like you're like, what are these guys doing? Like it's fucking bizarre. Like you're rocking around biting people? Like it's insanity.
Out of all the uncensored stories that they told, that was the one that maybe made the least amount of sense. I'm thinking, where are all the stories of the chicks and the drugs and the debauchery? I don't even think they used the word debauchery in this documentary once. The biting? Really? We're going here? Okay, I guess.
Oh my God, man. My favorite bit of animation is that, I can't remember who it was, but that band at the table at the Rainbow, and they're using meat cleavers to chop up the cocaine. I mean, that was hilarious. Like the amount of coke that was going on. Oh my God.
Yeah. I keep razzing on it's uncensored.
Yeah.
I did want a little bit more of that. I did want a little bit more of the acknowledgement of the level of excess that was going on.
You wanted more than Ozzy shitting in people's shoes? You wanted more than that?
I did, actually. I did.
Oh my God.
You know, they had to show clips from the decline of Western civilization. I'm sure there's a handful of stories out there that would have been a lot better than Motley Crue biting Eddie Van Halen.
You make a good point. And I keep thinking they actually animated Ozzy shitting in somebody's shoe. An animator actually did that.
And that's the part of the animating that I really enjoyed. It was fun. Absolutely.
Okay, man. I got to talk about this. I am not a Winger fan at all. Do I respect everybody in the band? Absolutely. These guys are super talented. I know where they came from, but I'm not into their music. That whole Beavis and Butthead destroying their career is absolutely fucking brutal. I mean, I wonder if Mike Judge feels bad about that in hindsight. Like, because I know James Hetfield, I think he apologized to Kip for that whole throwing the dart scene and the Nothing Else Matters video. I think he apologized to him because it ruined these guys overnight. And man, that is brutal.
It was a powerful few minutes. Like Reb Beach wanted no part of going down that road at first.
Yeah.
It was really disappointing that part of the documentary was the only part that we saw these guys from Winger. Did they have more of a story to tell? Probably. There's the nerd wearing the Winger t-shirt and Beavis and Butthead. It didn't dawn on me until watching this doc, just how damaging that was. And it really was unfortunate. You know, it's funny at the time, but hindsight, holy crap. I bet you there's still some uneasy feelings about that.
Oh, at the time, I thought it was hilarious. But as a grown-ass man, it is pretty brutal, man. Like, honestly. That show could make or break a band. Like, I remember seeing an interview with Rob Zombie, and they played that White Zombie video, Thunder Kiss 65, and Beavis and Butthead liked it. He goes, we went from playing bars to fucking arenas overnight. Like, it can work the other way, which is crazy. They're cartoon characters. Who gives a fuck what they think, right? But it really was impactful shit.
It's the power of television, without question. That medium at that time was so powerful in the world of music. Music videos were everything at that time. And that's a big reason why you saw bands like Poison and Bon Jovi and Skid Row and good-looking frontman. That's all of a sudden a big part of the equation for success. And you talked about them earlier, Tough. This is a band I didn't even remember back in the 80s, but I loved their story in the third part where they're literally riding the line of we're here as this era is completely imploding and completely destroying itself. So, yeah.
I'll give him this. He was very self-aware and knew, okay, this isn't going to last. And he knew he was a Bret Michaels copy. He knew all that, but he goes, it was fun. I don't regret it. And I have no bad feelings about it. He was very candid. And I thought that was cool.
Totally agree. He was forthcoming. He had a good perspective, and he didn't seem like somebody who let that limited success at that time period dictate a lot of his 90s and into his 30s and 40s. So
exactly. He enjoyed it while it lasted. Okay, let's talk more about that third act, man. Here's the thing for me. Nirvana and that whole grunge movement, like, it didn't single-handedly bring this fucking scene down. Let's just say that. It was already diluted to the fucking max. There were bands that sucked. The scene was imploding anyway, let's face it. I mean, they were signing, like you said, band after band. It was a copy of a copy of a copy. I mean, if all you could do was that one thing, your career was fucking over. If you couldn't roll with it on some level, you were done. And that's fine. It needed to end. Let's face it.
Totally agree. It had reached the end of their act 3 in that story. They had the uprise, they had the peak, and then they crashed and burned, and it was time for something else. And yeah, the timing of it was perfect for a band like Nirvana to come in and change everybody's viewpoint. It felt like overnight. So it really does have that feeling that they were the death nail. It's a convenient talking point, I think, to go to, but you're absolutely right. It is not the reason.
What is shocking about it, though, Brett, is it was like a light switch, which is very cruel, right? Like that dude from Kix talking about they're in the middle of shooting a music video and they literally fucking pull the plug. Now, you guys are done right in the middle of a video shoot. Like, that shit must have been devastating. Like, there was no just gradual fade out. It was fucking boom, over.
It's interesting because he's laughing about it now. I can't imagine being in that position at that time. Maybe he was so drugged out, he just was completely unaware of what was going on. But it shows you the immediacy and the power of the music industry. If you know that all of a sudden this is no longer going to make us money, we are not going to invest another single solitary cent into it.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head. It's all about money. It's 100% about that. It's not about these people's livelihoods and the people that work with them and crews and shit. I mean, it was devastating to a lot of people, I'm sure, right? But I'll say this, man. I don't know about you, but even though that musical tide changed, and I like a lot of that grunge and alternative stuff, I love a lot of it, I didn't stop listening to this other shit I liked. If I like it, I fucking like it. Maybe I listen to it a bit less, but it's not like all of a sudden I hate Rat. That didn't happen. Like, I'm not a fucking trend jumper. What can I say? I mean, if it's something I like it. I don't give a fuck when it was recorded. You know what I mean?
100%. I think for me, what I ended up doing or realizing is seeing the oversaturation that was created. I used to have literally hundreds of cassettes in the 80s, and it was bands of bands of bands. Like, I had them all. And it made me step back and go, what the fuck am I doing here? Why do I have this fire pit of disposable fluff here? Why is this here?
Why do I have this tough cassette?
It made me reassess the bands. And it's like, you know what? The bands that were the trendsetters were the ones that stuck around. And it's why some of my favorite bands of all time are the Guns N' Roses, are the Motley Crues, are the Skid Rows, are the ones that can stand the test of time because they created something. They didn't just copy it.
Absolutely. There's a reason Motley and Poison and Def Leppard and Bon Jovi, they're around today, still playing to big crowds, right? There's a reason.
And I love that they did talk about it right at the end, where this resurgence with the Rocklahomas and the whatnot, it really, I think, is a perfect bookend to that genre because it was a wonderful time in our lives. And to be able to relive that, it was fun. This was not music that had deep rooted philosophical meaning or, messaging. No, this was fun music that you threw the tape in the car and you cranked it and you went cruising for a while. And that's what I love about this music.
You don't think She's My Cherry Pie is deep? Come on.
Well, once I saw the video, then I was like, okay, double entendres, man. They're the kings.
I'm definitely not a Warrant guy, but that video when they showed that piece of pie falling right in her lap, I'm like, wow, just hit that nail right on the fucking head, eh? Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, man, let's put a pin in this fucking thing. What are your final thoughts, Smiles? What are your final thoughts on this documentary?
I went in with very wide eyes because it's ballsy to throw the word uncensored into the title of your documentary. And it really set the stage for high expectation for me. And you better have the balls to back it up. I don't think it quite did. I would love to read the book because, as you said, all of that is in the book. I bet you the book is a far more enjoyable experience as a result. There were parts of this doc that I really loved. There were some artists I loved hearing their voice, telling the stories, talking about the landscape and the time period. There were a number of guys that I really enjoyed hearing from. Yeah, the A&R reps and the music producers and the guys at the studio and whatnot. If you fill up the story that way, sure. I feel like it drops things down a notch or two because of that. It was a wonderful storytelling arc that they went with. And I think, kudos to the team that put it together because, yeah, it's a daunting story for sure.
Yeah, it just wasn't long enough. I mean, after reading the book, there could have been way, way more to this thing, obviously. I realize you can't tell everybody's complete story in a couple hours, but of course I wanted more. I could have watched this for 10 hours. But overall, it was entertaining enough. Like, to your point, it brought back the memories. It hit enough of the high points, to get the whole idea what the vibe was at that time. It's good, not great. It could have been great, but that's the sad part, isn't it? It's a bit, what's the word? It's a bit formulaic. Like, it doesn't dig that deep. It skims. It does a lot of skimming, Brett.
It was a daunting doc to try and put together, and for that I give him credit, no question. But it missed its mark in a few spots.
Part of it too for me, I'm so into this shit. I mean, there's no pleasing me, really. I mean, another thought I had, Brett, if I can sit for 5 fucking hours and watch Bon Jovi, this could have been over 2.5. Like, come on.
I don't know if there would have been a proper length or a proper amount that would have satisfied. You don't want it to be just surface, but at the same time, you can't do that and hit all the different marks that are out there. It's impossible.
You're right, it is.
Maybe I'm diving into this topic too late, but unless you're a band like Trickster, where we got the entire story.
Which I don't need, by the way. Which one of these guys did Steve Brown blow to get that whole fucking segment?
I'm like, this was the shifting of the weight that made no sense to me. This guy gets the spotlight for so long, and Randy Rhoads gets an award and a plane crash. Are you kidding me? Like, it makes no sense.
I totally forgot about that. The Trickster segment. I'm like, I couldn't name a song. I never listened to a note.
I had the cassette.
You did, eh?
I
oh
did.
My God. How many X's are in Trickster? Just one or is there two? Oh my God. Here's my other point. Again, they needed more household names in terms of interviews to really sell these fucking stories. We said that. I think overall it was a missed opportunity to really give this genre the time and respect I think it deserves. Sure, there's some shitty bands. I get it. Every scene has shitty bands, but there's some quality musicians making this music, and they're writing catchy fucking rock tunes that people are still rocking to today. I think the opportunity was a bit blown. That's what I think.
I totally agree. You've got guys like Sabo and Bolin from Skid Row. You've got them sitting down. You've got them talking. And it feels like it's, we're not going to ask you about any of this stuff. We want this little narrow lane of, the formation of the band and then the implosion of the band. And you barely talked about the actual music you created and the impact of the music that the band created. Where is that? This celebration of these songs that a lot of people still listen to today. Huge miss.
Okay, Brett, that's a wrap, buddy. Thanks for joining me. That was awesome.
Cheers, man. Always appreciate the time. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to doing this again. This was a ton of fun. Really enjoyed this doc and enjoyed talking with you about it.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate you taking the time to hang with us. Let us know what you guys think of Nothing But a Good Time in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on all the socials or podcasts or broadcasts. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, kids. And until next time, on behalf of Brett Miles and myself, keep rock alive, people. Peace out.